So with that, here we go. Good evening and welcome to the Cottage Grove Planning Commission regular meeting for March 22nd, 2021. We'll go ahead and start with roll call. I'll turn that over to Director Boyke.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bigham.
Here.
Commissioner Britton. Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Frazier.
Here.
Commissioner Knable. Commissioner Knable.
Here.
Commissioner Rasmussen.
Here.
And Chair Kambata.
Here. All right. Next will be approval of the agenda. If there are no questions or changes to be raised, I will defer this over to the director again for roll call.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Frazier.
Second, Commissioner Bigham.
Okay. Any follow-up or questions before we move on to roll call? All right. Seeing that, we'll turn it over to the director. Thank you.
Commissioner Frazier.
Aye.
Commissioner Bigham.
Aye.
Commissioner Britton. Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Knable.
Aye.
Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
And Chair Kambata.
Aye. Motion carries. On to item 4, open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone in attendance to raise a question or comment about an item that is not already on tonight's agenda. If you do have comment relative to an item that is on tonight's agenda, we will have a public hearing opportunity for each of those items. So with that, we'll see if we've got anyone here who has anything to add or share before we move on. And then I'll just check with Mr. Director and make sure I'm not missing anyone before we move on.
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anybody.
Okay. And with that, we will move on. Item 5 is Chair's explanation of the hearing process. The Planning Commission is a volunteer advisory group to the City Council. One of the Commission's functions is to hold public hearings and make recommendations on land use and zoning matters. The purpose of these public hearings is to provide an opportunity for each applicant and citizens to present information, ask questions, and express opinions. Since these proceedings are televised and recorded for the public record, anyone wishing to speak can do so in one of 2 ways. You may post a question using the Q&A option. If you post a question, I'll state the question to the Planning Commission and staff, and we will address the questions accordingly. You may also use the raise my hand option. If you wish to verbally ask a question, please test your device's microphone prior to selecting the raise my hand option to assure that you will be heard. I will then call on you by name and ask the question. Please understand that once the question has been asked, you will be muted. If you have a follow-up question, please reselect the raise my hand option for additional questions. Staff reports are prepared and provided to the applicant and the Planning Commission in advance of the meeting. The first step in the hearing process will be for staff to present a summary of the report. The applicant will then have an opportunity to briefly explain the proposal and provide additional information or comments. Anyone wanting to speak in favor or against the proposal will then be heard. Upon completion of the testimony, the hearing will be closed to the public comments. The Planning Commission will then discuss and act on the matter. The agenda packet is available for viewing on the Cottage Grove website. The City Council will act on these items at their meeting on Wednesday, April 21st, 2021, which starts at 7 p.m. With that, we will move on to item 6.1, which is Lamar Avenue, Nash, MS 2021-021 and ZA 2021-022, with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Oh, excuse me, got the wrong. Oh, of course, technical difficulties. My apologies. Oh. One moment, Mr. Chair. All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my apologies there. First item before you this evening is an application received by Catherine and Andrew Nash for a zoning amendment in a minor subdivision. The parcel in question is located just at the Cottage Grove Woodbury border, adjacent to Lamar Avenue. The applicant owns two parcels, the 10-acre parcel, which is within the Woodbury city limits, and the 6-acre parcel, which is just south of that city boundary within the city of Cottage Grove. The applicant is currently working with the city of Woodbury to construct a new home on the northerly 10 acres. The current parcel does have a home and several outbuildings, which they are planning to remove. The current parcel is zoned AG1 agricultural preservation, and the applicant is proposing to rezone to R1 rural residential, which is a minimum of a 3-acre lot size. This proposal does align with the 2040 land use plan, which does in fact guide this particular parcel as rural residential. Again, those 3-acre lot sizes. And I'll note that that R1 rural residential zoning does align with the majority of the parcels to the west and to the south. And again, will be the future development of this particular area. They are proposing to create two 3-acre parcels, as I've indicated, parcel A and parcel B, shown below, which again is that minimum lot size. They are proposing a private driveway easement, which will be recorded against all 3 of the parcels, given the 6-acre parcel does have very minimal frontage onto Lamar Avenue. So by proposing this driveway easement, they are in fact providing that frontage for each parcel A and parcel B. That easement will extend, as they've proposed here, 180 feet to the east onto parcel B, which is the minimum frontage required to create a new lot. Given these parcels are in fact rural in nature, and we do not yet, nor in the very near future, will have city utilities out to this area, so they will require private well and septic. So the applicant has gone ahead and had a licensed septic professional do some percolation tests out there on the site, which is required as a part of the building permit process to ensure there is a viable building site on each parcel A and parcel B. Area charges will be required as a part of the proposal. Park dedication will be required to be paid for the newly created parcel as a part of the building permit process, and the storm sewer, which is typically for minor subdivisions in the rural areas. We do our rural friendly charge, which will be required at the time we do record the deeds creating that minor subdivision. And finally, as part of the proposal, we are asking that the applicant dedicate the small portion of right-of-way, which is typical with past minor subdivisions and plats, that we do ask those applicants to dedicate any right-of-way that has not already been, which, as you can see, will align with that total 33 feet on either side of the center of Lamar Avenue as a part of this request. And with that, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I will leave the recommendation before you. Staff is available for any questions, and I know the applicant is on the call as well.
Thank you very much. At this time, if the applicant has anything that they'd like to add, we invite them to do so.
Thank you, Chair. We have nothing to add.
Thank you. Do any of the members of the commission have questions for staff or the applicant before we move on to public hearing? All right, seeing none, we will open the public hearing. Again, for anyone wishing to speak for or against the application, you may do so in one of 2 ways. You may post a question using the Q&A option. If you post a question, I'll state the question to the Planning Commission and staff, and we will address the questions accordingly. You may use the raise my hand option if you wish to verbally ask a question. Please test your device's microphone prior to selecting the raise my hand option to assure that you will be heard. I'll then call on you by name to ask the question. Please understand that once the question has been asked, you'll be muted. If you have follow-up questions, please reselect the raise my hand option. With that, we'll move on to open hearing or public hearing. See if anyone has anything to add. All right. I'm not seeing anyone. Director, can you confirm that before we move on?
Yes, that is confirmed.
All right. We will close public hearing and further discussion from the commission. I'd just like to add that I thought the presentation that staff put together was very thorough and informative. The one issue I was going to raise with the application was resolved with the driveway easement. So I'm glad that everyone was thinking about egress onto the public road. And I think everything else falls pretty well in line with the 2040 comp plan and with zoning requirements. This time, if we have no further discussion, I would look for a motion.
Commissioner Frazier, I'd make a motion to approve the minor subdivision and zoning amendment subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second, Commissioner Fisher.
Commissioner Knable.
We have a second from Commissioner Fisher and a third from Commissioner Knable. Further discussion? All right. We have a motion to approve subject to the motion to approve the minor subdivision and zoning amendment subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report. At this time, I'll turn it over to the director for roll call.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Frazier,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Bigham,
Aye.
Commissioner Knable,
Aye.
Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
And Chair Kambata.
Aye. Motion carries. On to item 6.2, Hadley Scott, Xcel Regulator, conditional use permit 2021-023 with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Mr. Chair, again, my apologies. All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, again, my apologies. We are in business. The next item before you is an application received by Xcel Energy for a CUP. The parcel in question is located at Hadley Avenue and Scott Boulevard. It is an outlot, and I should note the applicant's request is to install an above ground gas regulator station, which are those pipes that you see around town that kind of come and stick up out of the ground a bit. Again, parcel is an outlot. It is in fact privately owned. There is an existing utility easement and infrastructure on this privately owned parcel. As you can see here, there are some utility lines, and then of course the existing gas line that does in fact run through the parcel. Xcel, as a part of their Southeast Metro Natural Gas project that they're looking to get underway this year, is reinstallation of their gas pipe that runs from the Langdon area of Cottage Grove all the way up to the north part of St. Paul Park. And this project will upgrade the existing system, which includes 6, 9, and 12-inch pipe that were installed somewhere around the 1950s. So are in fact in need of that upgrade, and they will upgrade to all new 12-inch pipes. Now, this larger pipe size will allow for Xcel to do much more televising, which of course is a safety precaution to evaluate the conditions of those pipes more often and more efficiently. With this project, existing underground regulator stations are in fact being brought above ground, again, for safety purposes, much easier to maintain and evaluate the safety nature and condition of those particular regulator sites. The image before you on the top there, of course, are those pipes, those regular pipes that do extend out of the ground. The applicant is proposing as part of this request to provide some additional screening given its visibility from the public right-of-way, which includes the fencing shown below with the brick or block bollards on either end. I'll note as a condition of approval, we do want the applicant to install some sort of composite material to ensure that these fencing materials do maintain long-term as a part of course, the Minnesota winters with the cold, rain, snow, salt, all of the above. We just want to make sure that those stay visually appealing in the long term. And with that, I will leave the recommendation before you. Again, staff is available to answer any questions, and I know the applicant is on the call as well for any specific questions related to the proposal.
Thank you very much. At this time, if the applicant would like to add anything, we invite them to do so.
Good evening. This is Brian Sullivan. I'm with Xcel Energy. And we're pleased to be before you tonight to introduce you to our project and to our request for the regulator stations there. Just to give you a little bit of a background, Emily did a nice job of kind of summarizing that, but the gas line that we're replacing, like she said, was built in the 50s, and it consists of 3 different pipe sizes. And I couldn't tell you why there's 3 different pipe sizes, but there's 3 different pipe sizes through there. And so what we're planning to do is to replace them all with one consistent pipe size, and that way we can run the devices that can go through the pipe, and they can measure them from the inside out. They can do X-rays, they can televise them, they can do a lot of different things with that. But it just makes for an easier inspection process. And this system is part of, there's like 4 or 5 pipes that kind of feed the East Metro area, and this is one of them. So it's an important part of our system that feeds St. Paul, Woodbury, Maple Grove, Roseville, and so everything on the east side of the metro here in St. Paul. What a regulator station does, it takes the pressure of the pipe that's in the 12-inch pipeline and reduces it down so that it can be used by the businesses and the residents in the community there. So that's the main purpose for the regulator station. And we've for years, well, I should take this back. Originally, they put regulator stations above ground, and then for a while they started putting them underground, just because of the visual aspects of it. But what they've learned is that because of Minnesota winters, water gets in there and things freeze up, and then they need to get in there and they can't turn a valve, and so they're stuck trying to thaw it out, and it's become a hazard as far as trying to get things done quickly and safely. So that's why things are going above ground again here. Just it's really for a safety purpose, and we've provided some screening there to help visually screen the regulator station from the public, and we think that'll be a nice streetscape addition to the neighborhood there. And with that, I'll leave it open to any questions you might have for us.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. With that, does the commission have any questions for staff or the applicant before we proceed with public hearing?
This is Commissioner Rasmussen. I have one question, please.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to get a feel for, the size, how big of regulators these are. We know it's a 12-inch pipe. They showed a photo in one of the previous slides. Was that existing conditions, or is that how is the new system going to look compared to that? I'm assuming that's existing.
Well, this is actually a regulator station that's very similar to what's going. This is actually from a different location. I think this is in North St. Paul, actually. And so what our engineers, they can do magic. So they took that photograph of that image and they plopped it into the proposed location. So it's a simulation of what those regulator station would look like.
Okay, and there's no outbuildings or sheds or anything that go along with it?
No, there's nothing like that. No.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any additional questions or comment before we move on? Okay, thank you. At this time, we will open it up for public hearing. As stated before, you'll have two options for asking a question. One, you may post a question using the Q&A option. If you post a question, I'll state the question to the Planning Commission and staff, and we will address the questions accordingly. Second is to use the raise my hand option if you wish to verbally ask a question. Please test your device's microphone prior to selecting the raise my hand option to assure that you'll be heard. I will then call on you by name and ask the question. Please understand that once the question has been asked, you'll be muted. If you have follow-up questions, please reselect the raise my hand option. And with that, we will open it up for public hearing. And we'll see if anyone wants to add anything. I'll give it one more second here. Just to confirm with the director before I move on, I'm not missing anyone.
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anything.
All right, with that, we will close public hearing. Additional questions or comment from the commission? I appreciate that their part of the plan includes screening. To Commissioner Rasmussen's comment that kind of wanting to know what the finished product is going to be and how it's going to appear, especially since it's going to be on such a high traffic area. I was happy to see that. I know I've seen some other stations where it's not screened in other cities, and it's quite a visible distraction, I think, for drivers. So I was happy to see that. Any additional comment before we move on to the next step here? Right, seeing none, at this time I'll look for a motion.
I'd motion to approve the conditional use permit for a gas regulator station at Hadley Avenue and Scott Boulevard, subject to conditions and staff report.
All right, we've got a motion to approve from Commissioner Rasmussen. Do we have a second?
Second from Commissioner Bigham.
We have a second from Commissioner Bigham. Further discussion? All right, seeing none, I will turn this over. We have a motion to approve the conditional use permit subject to the stipulations outlined in the staff report. And I'll turn it over to the director for roll call.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
Commissioner Bigham.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Frazier.
Aye.
Commissioner Knable.
Aye.
And Chair Kabata.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 6.3, expanded use at 10870 Ideal, conditional use permit application 2021-018 with Director Boyke presenting.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Tonight, we have an application for a conditional use permit to allow the expansion of a legal non-conforming use at 10870 Ideal Avenue South to allow exterior storage, delivery, return, and service of semi-trailers and ground-level office and storage containers. In terms of location, the subject property is located on the south end of town off of Ideal Avenue South, just north of 110th Street South. A couple pictures on the right show a picture from the public right-of-way of the building fronting the property, one kind of from the north side and the top one from the south side of the property. So in terms of background, the property is currently occupied by Acton Mobile. ICUP was approved back in 2015, which does expire on August 31st, 2025. That interim conditional use permit does allow for the exterior storage, delivery, return, and service of mobile office trailers. The potential buyer of the property is City Cargo and Storage Company Incorporated, CCNS, who has a purchase agreement with the applicant to purchase the property. The application is to expand the legal non-conforming uses to add the storage of semi-trailers and ground level office and storage containers. So CCNS is proposing to utilize the property as an overflow lot. Their base is out of Eagan, Minnesota. They would use the proposed site to store up to 150 units during peak season, which is from about the holiday season to the start of construction season. And other times of the year, it'd be about a third of that, around 50 storage units on site. When the request initially came to the city, staff informed the applicant that the proposed use was close enough to the existing ICUP use, and therefore they could go ahead and utilize the property as such. However, the applicant opted to proceed with the CUP application, again, to expand the legal non-conforming uses, which would then not expire per that sunset date of August 31st, 2025. So a big component of this is referring back to the land use and zoning of the sites. The land use, the property is guided for low density residential in the recently approved 2040 comp plan. And the property is currently zoned R3 single family residential, which aligns with that land use designation. And we'll kind of come back to that in a second here. So two sections of ordinance that were reviewed in reviewing this application is the first one being 11.3.1. In relation to non-conforming uses and structures, reading that expansion of non-conforming uses and structures, the city may, and may being the key word, by conditional use permit, allow for an expansion of legal nonconformity, including the lawful use or occupation of land or premise. So as a result of that, and this follows state statute, the applicant is not entitled to expand the legal nonconforming use through this CUP, and that the city does have discretion based on the word may in the ordinance. Moving on from that, with all conditional use permit applications, staff and the city look at the following criteria, 1 through 10. In this case, I'm going to call out items 1, 2, and 10 with the review. 1 being the use will be in conformity with the city's comprehensive plan. 2, that the uses shall be located, designed, maintained, and operated to be compatible with the existing or intended character of that zoning district. And 10, which I have to move my Zoom bar down here to read, the use shall not adversely affect the potential development of adjacent vacant land. So in reviewing the application and discussing with the city attorney's office, staff does not believe that the requested use satisfies the criteria that I just outlined, specifically items 1, 2, and 10. The proposed use is inconsistent with the 2040 comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance. Again, being that the property is guided low density residential in the comp plan and is currently zoned R3 low density residential. In addition, a permanent CUP allowing the non-conforming use will impede orderly development area. City water is actually currently available at this site, and the city is in the process of extending city sewer to the site, which does cater for development of the adjacent parcels, again being zoned single family residential. In addition, adjacent legal non-conforming uses to the north and south are not protected by CUPs. So with that, staff is recommending, the Planning Commission recommend that, sorry for the typo there, that the city, oh, that's correct, that the City Council deny the conditional use permit for the expansion of the non-conforming use, subject to the 3 listed findings of fact, again, going back to items 1, 2, and 10 in the language. And I'll leave the language up for here for review. The applicant is in attendance, as well as a representative of the city attorney's office, Amanda Johnson, should there be any legal questions for the commission. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for any questions.
All right. Thank you, sir. At this time, if the applicant has anything that they'd like to add, we invite them to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mark Thiroff. I want to make sure you can hear me. First of all, I see I've unmuted, but is everyone able to hear me?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, I represent the applicant who, as you heard in Mr. Boyke's presentation, is currently selling the property. It's under contract to sell. One of the conditions of the purchase agreement is that we're able to secure a conditional use permit that will allow the use to continue on the property. I want to just take a few minutes this evening. I'm going to talk first a little bit about the current status on the property as it relates to the various provisions of the zoning ordinance. And then I've got a few comments on the staff recommendation. As far as the current status goes, it's important to underscore that this property may be guided and zoned residential, but it can't be used for that purpose now. It has a junkyard, an active junkyard immediately to the south, an active contractor's yard immediately to the north. And just by virtue of its shape, it's highly doubtful this property could be developed for residential purposes, even if someone were willing to buy residential property next door to those uses. It has relatively limited frontage on Ideal Avenue in relation to the overall size of the parcel. It would be very difficult to subdivide and develop for residential purposes. So the current guiding and zoning isn't helpful to the client and doesn't allow for any real practical use of the property. The property is also not eligible for a standard conditional use permit because the proposed storage use that has been ongoing and that the buyer would like to continue is not a conditionally permitted use in the R3 district. It's also not eligible for an interim conditional use permit because, again, the proposed storage use is not eligible for an ICUP. I see under your ordinance there's only 5 uses that are eligible for ICUPs, and those are in situations of threatened condemnation, blacktop or crushing plants, housing development promotional signs, stockpiling materials, and temporary structures. So we're not eligible for an ICUP either. So that means the only option available to my client is to remain under the non-conforming use regime. And the expansion that we seek to the existing non-conforming use status is extremely limited. As you heard in Mr. Boyke's presentation, in fact, his initial response was it was close enough to the existing lawful non-conforming use that the city was willing to allow us just to continue with the change being made. So there isn't a change here that's significant or one that should give pause or really factor much into your analysis this evening. As you heard in the staff presentation, there doesn't appear to be any concerns about the use at all, with the emphasis of the analysis focusing solely on these legal questions. As far as the 3 bases that have been presented as grounds for denying the application, the first 2 relating to conformity with or compliance with the guiding and the zoning, it's a rather curious legal issue that comes up under your zoning ordinance, and thank you, and doesn't come up in a lot of other places. And the reason it comes up under your ordinance is your city has opted to regulate the expansion of non-conforming uses through conditional use permits. A lot of other cities do it differently. Some have actually a permit to expand a non-conforming use. But the only thing that's important for us right now is because you use your CUP mechanism to regulate non-conforming uses, you automatically import these 2 initial requirements and the rest of the general requirements that govern CUPs, and they don't really fit. And the reason they don't fit is that non-conforming uses are legal uses in your city. They are, by definition, consistent with the comprehensive plan and the zoning district because they are statutorily allowed to exist and continue. It can't be that something that's allowed by statute is by definition contrary to your comprehensive plan or zoning ordinance. So I would suggest to you that those 2 conditions shouldn't apply in the first place. But if you're going to apply them, I think you have to determine that they're in conformity with those requirements because it's a lawful non-conforming use. I recognize there's some discretion here for the city to decide whether to allow the expansion or not. But as far as the non-conforming use itself, it's clearly lawful and clearly consistent. Regarding the factor 10, that the use shall not adversely affect the potential development of adjacent vacant land, couple points. First of all, it applies to adjacent vacant land. And the land that's been talked about this evening, that is the 2 properties on either side, to the north and to the south, they're not vacant. They are ongoing uses. The junkyard, I understand, has been in operation since the 1950s. And there's no indication that we've had from either of those property owners that they have any intention of ceasing those activities and those businesses. So 10's not really a good fit because we're not talking about the development of adjacent vacant land. There's occupied land, and it's the site of active business operations. There was also in the staff report discussion of the difference between the non-conforming use status that we have and that we seek to expand and the conditional use permit status of those two adjoining uses. And the suggestion in the staff report is that those two uses, they are non-conforming uses, and therefore there's ways in which those could be ultimately, they could terminate. Whereas if you were to grant a CUP to my client, that's potentially an indefinite use. I would suggest to you that that's really not the right analysis. First of all, it's very, very limited, the circumstances in which you can terminate a non-conforming use. It's fire. Don't know how many contractors' yards have fires, but fire is one of them. And of course, the other is were they to cease operations for a year or more. In either of those circumstances, those uses could be terminated. The important thing, though, is that those same conditions or similar conditions could be built into the CUP that we're asking for. You could put as a condition of approval language in there that says that one of the conditions is that the use not change, that the use continue exactly in the same way that it's operating now. And you could also put in there that in the event the property owner were to cease operations for a specific period of time, a year or whatever you should choose, that would also be grounds for revoking this conditional use permit. So it's not really the case that the non-conforming use status of the neighbors is something that the city has much control over, and nor is it the case that granting us a CUP means that our property is going to be used forever in the manner that we're now seeking to use it in. And the last comment I would just leave you with is I think we have to keep in mind that this property, this is a transitional area. You've guided it differently. I think you expect that years from now, this is going to be an area that's been redeveloped for residential purposes. And if the concern is that my client's property might somehow hold up those plans if a CUP were granted, residential development is a much higher and better use of that land than storing semi-trailers. My client probably won't own the property at that time, and I certainly can't make any representations on its behalf. But I can tell you that in my experience, most rational business owners who have property that they're using for a very low value use, such as semi-trailer storage, when given the opportunity to sell that land for a much higher and better use, that is residential development, they're almost always very happy to relocate the low value use and sell that land for development. So as financial conditions, economic conditions change in the neighborhood, and as residential development comes, I think we need to keep an open mind to the idea that someone might not just continue that because they have a CUP when they can sell the property for more money and relocate the low use somewhere else. Yeah, and I would just leave you with the last comment that given this transitional nature of the area and the fact that there are no lawful uses of this property under its current guiding and zoning, it strikes me as it's somewhat unfair to expect my client to bear the entire economic burden of the fact that the property is located in a place where the adjoining uses prevent currently its desired redevelopment, and yet we can't really do anything with it in the meantime. I would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, I've got a follow-up question, well, several follow-up questions for you. Is one of the conditions for the sale of this property testing and mitigation of recognized environmental concerns?
I believe there is a phase one. There was a phase one done when my client bought the property, which wasn't that many years ago. I want to say that was 2017, 2018, somewhere along those lines. I don't have the purchase agreement here in front of me, and I'm actually not handling the real estate transaction. I'm handling the land use side of things. If that were important information for you, I could confirm it and get that information for you, but I'm pretty confident there's a phase one at least.
Okay. Maybe that's something I can have the staff follow up with you guys if it requires further investigation. I was just hoping maybe you had been briefed on that. Additionally, you said you cited other cities and how they might do things differently. One area of non-conforming, legal non-conforming use that comes to mind in Cottage Grove is aggregate mining. And with those conditional use permits, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but I think those are also interim conditional use permits. Those require an annual renewal of that permit. So with other cities, we are in some cases more stringent in that we're asking for that applicant to come back to the city on an annual basis and reassess their need for that legal non-conforming use to extend. Whereas with this one, it would appear, and this is before my time on the commission, that in 2015, this was a compromise for the current non-conforming use of that property. So as an alternative, I would think anything other than this would require a more stringent oversight by the city, not less. So with having a legal non-conforming use that is in accordance with what your client or the future owner wants to do with the property for another period of another 4 or 5 years, that doesn't mean that they couldn't come back and, ask for an application where maybe there was annual oversight. Because as you had said, with them wanting the highest and best use of the land, I would argue that the proposed use is not very readily available within the metro area. So a legal non-conforming use of this type would have significant value to the right business owner. So then it would maybe deter the intended use, long-term use of that land to be repurposed for residential. So do you have any insight into how many other locations might offer this same type of use for this future client?
I don't know where else CNS has looked. I don't know what their alternatives are. They like the proximity of this site to their main site. We may have different experiences, and I certainly don't want to discount your experience on this issue. But again, businesses of this nature that own real estate and have operations, unless the operation is something that is very geographic specific, that it needs to be in Cottage Grove because of proximity to a supplier or a distributor or something, they will convert those real estate holdings into profit when they can. So as residential development comes, it makes sense to find a cheaper place to put the storage and sell the property and make that profit on the investment. And, I can't guarantee you that's going to happen, but that's my experience.
I think the one thing when we're reviewing these land use and zoning applications is, if we offered a conditional use permit and it was, never to expire, the city has no recourse to help, do what it needs to as far as guiding development there. Whereas to circle back to some of the other applications where they have one of the requirements of that conditional use permit or interim conditional use permit is basically an annual renewal of that application. And so long as you said, there's no higher and better use for that property, the city would have no objection to the continuation of that use. So I'm curious if the applicant had considered that as an alternative when they submitted this application.
Well, I can tell you, when we reviewed your ordinance and reviewed the comprehensive plan and did our due diligence on, the state of residential development in the area and so forth, there aren't really any any options there, because, you know, the last time around, the then property owner applied for a conditional use permit just as we are doing now. They did not apply for an ICUP. It appears that in some sort of negotiation, they were convinced to agree to a time-limited conditional use permit, which of course, as you know, by statute isn't possible. So looks like they put the word interim in the front of the approval, but this isn't a use that you can approve by an interim conditional use permit. It's not allowed under your ordinance. So we're kind of in a bind. I mean, if there were a way to tie the use, the time during which the use would be allowed to progress of development in the area, I think that's something my client would consider and at least be willing to discuss it with the buyer. But right now, I mean, I think there's a disagreement on how imminent residential development is in this area. We certainly don't think that anything is going to be happening by 2025. Our buyer's not interested in going through this process itself, and needs to, if it's going to buy the property, needs an approval that will allow it to operate sufficiently far into the future, that, you know, it's got options and so forth. You know, I should also point out, at the end of the day, if the city wanted the use to end and wanted to make this property available for redevelopment, it could condemn the CUP. It could condemn the non-conforming use. You know, if the highest and best use analysis that I gave you isn't convincing. It's just, I mean, it's either that or you're forcing my client to hold a piece of property that has artificially depressed value because it's been zoned and guided in a way that it can't be used.
As far as the state statute and the ordinances you referenced, we would have to defer to the city's attorney.
Sure.
So I can't get into that. I think I've asked all of the questions related to the land use and highest and best use that I could think of. Does anyone else on the commission have anything to ask of the applicant or staff before we move to public hearing? Thank you for your time, Mark, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, with that, then we will move to public hearing. And for anyone wishing to speak for or against the application, you may do so in one of the two following ways. You may post a question using the Q&A option. If you post a question, I'll state the question to the Planning Commission and staff, and we will address the question accordingly. You may also use the raise my hand option if you wish to verbally ask a question. Please test your device's microphone prior to selecting the raise my hand option to assure that you'll be heard. I'll then call on you by name to ask the question. Please understand that once you've asked the question, you will be muted. If you have follow-up questions, please reselect the raise my hand option. With that, we will see if anyone wants to chime in. We'll give it just a minute here. All right, I'm not seeing anyone. Director, can you just confirm that I'm not missing anyone before we move on?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing one as well.
All right. With that, we will close public hearing. And further discussion from the commission.
I have a question. This is Commissioner Fisher. Sorry, Commissioner Fraser. Do we know why the initial ICUP was given a 10-year length of time versus, like you said, Mr. Chair, that normally it's a yearly renewal? Why was this one given a 10-year time frame? Do we know anything about that?
That's a good question for staff. Is staff able to answer that?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fisher, I think Chair Gambata is correct in the fact that it was a negotiation back at the time. I know there were some existing CUPs that apply to the property as mentioned in the staff memo. And I think it was a negotiation in terms of allowing that use under an interim use or interim conditional use permit with that sunset date. Maybe I'll defer to Amanda Johnson. I don't know if she knows based on her research of this application, if she can provide any more information.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission members. Ben is correct. What they did at that point in time was they had some outstanding CUPs that had begun, I believe the first one maybe was in 1999. And there were some negotiations to kind of wipe the slate clean and start over with one CUP. And in the course of that negotiation, they wanted a sunset date on it, the city. And so that's where the 10-year timeframe came from.
All right. Thank you. And then I think we had one more question from the commission. Commissioner Fisher, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. And just to follow up, I guess. So Mark had mentioned that his client bought the property, he thought in 2018 or 2019. Was he aware of this ICUP when he bought the property? Because you made the comment that we're kind of forcing your client to hold a property where he can't use it anyway, but he would have bought this property with this ICUP attached to it. And so I'm just wondering if he fully understood the type of property that he was purchasing and what the city had laid out for its use in the future.
All right, thank you. Mark, is that something you can elaborate on?
Yes, I have no reason to believe he was unaware of the ICUP. I'm sure it's recorded. It's not an issue that's come up that this was somehow a surprise. But what I would say is that, as time gets closer and closer to 25, it gets clearer and clearer that this property isn't going to be ready for residential redevelopment. So, when you bought the property, conditions were slightly different than they are now. Obviously, as we get closer and closer to 2025, something needs to happen for him to be able to continue operating the property and using it for a permissible purpose, which currently post 2025 you won't be able to.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up questions from the commission? I thought Bigham had one. Maybe not.
I do have a question, actually. This is Commissioner Frazier.
Go ahead.
And this is for whoever can answer me. Maybe Mr. Thieroff knows or staff knows better. But my understanding is that there's a legal non-conforming use on the property, and there's an ICUP that allows certain other activities that's going to expire in 2025. So I guess my question is, after the ICUP expires in 2025, what is the scope and scale of the legal non-conforming use that will remain?
Good question.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would, from a staff perspective, defer to Ms. Johnson to answer that question.
So at that point, the legal non-conforming use will be the use that currently exists. So that's what they're doing right now. But what this ICUP is asking for is an expansion of the legal non-conforming use to allow the storage of these containers by the potential buyer. And so what that is the part that wouldn't be able to happen.
Okay, so I guess that makes me a little confused then, because I thought staff was of the impression that right now under the ICUP and the legal non-conforming use, that what this request is asking for can already take place. But that's just they wanted to formalize that into a conditional use permit rather than have the ICUP that's currently in place sunset. Is that not?
Okay, sir, I think I maybe misunderstood your question. So, right, when they first came to staff, they asked about sort of expanding this storage use, and staff said it's close enough to what your current permit allows. And so you don't need to do anything different, but the applicant doesn't want that use to stop as of 2025. And so that's why they brought this CUP application, because they don't want this use to sunset. And I'm sorry, I did not answer correctly. The answer is the use that they're currently doing, which is the storage, they would not be able to continue to do that because they are governed by this ICUP.
Okay.
And once this ICP is gone, then the ability to do whatever is under that ICUP is also gone.
Okay.
So what uses would remain, I think, is Commissioner Fraser's question. When this sunsets, assuming nothing happens, what uses would remain once the ICUP sunsets that is currently in place?
Whatever would be allowed under the zoning district.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Mr. Theroff, do you have
I'm sorry.
opinion or?
Well, I don't want to give you my opinion. That's not helpful. I would just refer you to your own staff report, which indicates that when the existing ICUP was granted, it rolled up a lot of the previous approvals, but it did leave the non-conforming use of salvage yard in place. This property used to be part of the property that's immediately to the south, where the salvage yard continues to operate. And per the staff report, and I'm just referring you to the staff report, per the staff report, this ICUP left that salvage yard non-conforming use in place.
Okay, and that was going to be my question as well, because as I read the staff report, it sounds like a lot of the legal non-conforming uses were rolled back, except for the 1999 resolution. And then there's a quote in there about what's allowed under the 1999 resolution. So is that what's going to be allowed on September 1st, 2025, is the buying, storing, dismantling, crushing, towing, and selling of automobiles and trucks, etc.?
I think it's just the junkyard use that's allowed.
Okay. So the language of the 1999 resolution is what's going to be allowed as a legal non-conforming use after the interim use conditional or the conditional use permit is expired.
Correct.
Okay. So there is some economic use to the property. We're not totally taking away any ability to use the property to make money after August 31st of 2025.
No.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I briefly?
Sure, go ahead.
I said before I wouldn't give you my opinion, but I'm going to offer an opinion on this one. Non-conforming use status, of course, under your ordinance and under state statute terminates after 1 year of non-use. So I would find it pretty surprising that we could have a piece of property where we haven't operated a salvage yard in, at that point, 10 years and be able to take the position that we still have non-conforming use protection for the ability to operate a salvage yard.
All right. Well, again, I'm not an attorney. I don't write the statute. I'll leave that to the city to sort out. Commissioner Fraser,
can I add something? Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another important fact, I guess, is the fact that city sewer is being extended in this direction, adjacent to this neighborhood. And there is a developer that is looking to develop surrounding parcels, not immediately surrounding, but in that area. So that's a big, I think, component of this request in specifically denying the request, is that there is residential development around the corner. I would argue that it's before 2025. Granted, I think Mr. Theroff is correct in that there's some challenges with the properties to the north and south and their existing uses. However, I think it's in the city's best interest to stay away from granting the CUP based on the fact that that development is around the corner, and we do not want to prohibit the potential from adjacent parcels and this parcel from being developed accordingly. So wanted to throw that in there as additional information.
Thank you, Director. Additional questions or comment from the commission? All right. Seeing none at this time, I would look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to deny the request for conditional use permit and adopt the findings of fact. I'm more swayed by finding of fact 1 and finding of fact 2, I think, just because the condition or the comprehensive plan, which we just passed last year, is clearly guiding the property for residential. The zoning is backed by that. I get Mr. Thieroff's argument. He had a hard argument because, like he said, our city does things differently than other cities. But I don't agree that a legal non-conforming use is necessarily cooperative with the comprehensive plan. I agree it's legal, and that's why it's allowed to operate. But the city has set it up to be residential. And right now, the legal non-conforming use, while it gets to continue, is not in conformity with the comprehensive plan or the zoning area. I do agree, I think, with Mr. Thieroff, and unless Mr. Boyke can point me to something different, I think the language of the ordinance says adversely affect the potential development of adjacent vacant land. I agree with Mr. Thieroff's point. I don't think there are any really vacant land adjacent to this property. It sounds like there are uses going on. But I think as far as findings of fact 1 and 2, that's a sufficient basis to deny the conditional use permit. So I'd make that motion.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion to deny in adopting the findings of fact from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second? I'll second. With that, further discussion. The primary reasons why I believe we need to deny this application is, as Commissioner Frazier stated, in stipulations 1 and 2, it isn't in accordance with our comprehensive plan. And in addition to that, I find it difficult to identify a hardship for the current property owner here, considering they bought it with that sunset in place. So, they knew this was coming, and, having a real estate background, I can't say that I wouldn't encourage my client to try and get a permanent use, which is how you guys got here tonight. However, there is no guarantee of that. Just as the statute says, the city may grant this. They are not required to, and the applicant is not entitled to this conditional use or an extension thereof. With that, I don't see the hardship here for the owner. I mean, it puts them in a hard spot with this current prospective buyer, but this is something that the owner, I'm sure, was aware of when they purchased, and this is just a logical step for them to try and overcome. And lacking a hardship and not conforming to the 2040 comp plan are my main objections to this application. Further discussion? If there's no further discussion at this time, I will put it to a vote. We have a motion to deny based on the findings of fact from Commissioner Frazier, and we have a second from myself. I'll turn it over for roll call.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Frazier.
Aye.
Chair Kambata.
Aye.
Commissioner Bigham. Aye. Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Knable.
Aye.
And Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
Motion carries. Application has been denied. Moving on to item 7. Thank you again, everyone, for their time. I know that one took a little bit for us to get through. Item 7 is approval of Planning Commission minutes for February 22nd, 2021. And if there are no amendments or alterations, I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Frazier.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second from Commissioner Rasmussen.
I have a second from Commissioner Rasmussen. I'll turn it over for roll call. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier,
Aye.
Commissioner Rasmussen,
Aye.
Commissioner Bigham. I think that was an aye. Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Knebel,
Aye.
and Chair Kambata.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on. Item 8.1, recap of city council meetings with Director Boyd.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to steal the show here for a second too and introduce a new staff member that we have on the call tonight. Mr. Mike Marosla is our new senior planner. And I'm going to put him on the spot and have him introduce himself here quick to the group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Marosla. I'm the new senior planner. I started a couple weeks ago. I'm happy to be here. I live in the city of Cottage Grove. Been here for 10 years, and there's a vacuum going in the background, so I apologize. I previously, the last 2 years, worked for the city of Arden Hills as city planner, and then prior to that, I was with the city of Woodbury for 6.5 years. So I'm excited to be here to join the team and serve the community I live in.
Wonderful. Thank you. Happy to have you aboard.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we've had 2 city council meetings since we last met. First one being on March 3rd, where we did not have any items pertaining to previous planning commission items. On March 17th, we did have several items. First one being conditional use permit amendment for Culver's Restaurant, which was approved by council. The second edition final plat for Woodward Ponds, which was also approved by council. The Summers Landing 5th edition final plat, and I'll mention that that was the final addition to the Summers Land Development. That was approved by council. We had the zoning amendment and preliminary plat for Cardinal Reserve, which was reviewed by the Planning Commission back in February. That was approved by council. And finally, the Caribou Cabin plat and site plan application was also approved by council. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Dennis for his updates.
All right. Well, thank you, Director Boyk, and good evening, Mr. Chair and Commission. I sit here and I watch this meeting tonight, and what I want to say, and notwithstanding the decision made by the panel, because generally from a respectful position, I don't weigh in on these things until they come before me and the rest of my colleagues on the council. But I just wanted to say how pleased and how proud I am of the work that all of you do. The thorough, thoughtful, and considerate nature upon which the dialogue was formed tonight, asking great questions, seeking information, doing your research and diligence, I thought was absolutely exceptional. And it shows how far this commission has come under the guidance and leadership of all of you as volunteers here for the city. So on behalf of myself and the rest of the city council and our staff, very much appreciate and thank you for the dedication of time and service that you provide to our city. So with that said, I will stand for any questions that you might have of me or anything related to any of the work going on right now with the city council.
Thank you. Any questions for the council member? Doesn't look like we've got anything tonight. Thank you for your time.
You guys are letting me off easy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
I think that takes us to item 8.2, response to planning commission inquiries. Don't believe we had any from the previous meeting. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, we have nothing.
Okay. And on to item 8.3, Planning Commission requests. Would the commission like to ask anything of staff or council?
This is Commissioner Rasmussen. I've got one quick question, please.
Go ahead.
Say I heard several months ago, maybe almost a year ago now, that I believe all of our terms were extended 1 year due to COVID. Where can we go find our dates, our expiration, or how long, our current term limits? Where could I go look that up?
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, I can certainly send you all a new copy of that with the extended terms. And yes, you're correct. The City Council did extend all commission terms by 1 year. So if you were set to expire this year, that would be pushed back to next year, so on and so forth. But I can certainly email that roster out with that updated information soon here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I personally like the current sitting members. I think we've got a diverse mix of backgrounds, and to Councilman Dennis's comment, we ask a lot of questions, and everyone has a slightly different viewpoint on things, and it's nice to be able to draw from that experience. So if anyone's term is up, I would hope that they choose to stay on, or that at the very least let council know well in advance, so we can get somebody equally as qualified to fill that position. I have
a quick question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm wondering if and when we're going to be able to meet in person again. I started on the commission. I've always been on Zoom, and I can't wait to meet you guys in person. So I'm just wondering if there's any talks or any plans for us to be able to meet in person at some point in the hopefully near future.
Mr. Chair, and I'll turn to Steve as well, but our thought was, since we're still coming out of COVID and since the Zoom calls have been working, to stay under Zoom for the time being, but I would imagine as things continue to loosen up, that will be a discussion in terms of bringing it back in person. Councilmember Dennis, any other thoughts?
Well, I would say this, and again, respectfully, I would like to defer this to the commission itself. And, again, for the work that you guys put in and helping us to perform a fantastic, transparent process here to the community on all the matters upon which we work. Tony, if you were so inclined, and if you wanted to, even make a motion here tonight, among the members, and let the members of the Planning Commission team decide, and make a vote as to whether or not they would like to continue with this format or meet in person. I would have no problem personally coming down and sitting on the side staff table. And I know we do have a limited number of spaces available. And one of the things that we've done very well is, as a council and staff, is we've provided very adequate social distancing inside the council chambers. So that would be something that, I would, out of respect for all of you, I would like to, let you guys make the choice on how you'd like to do that. I know there are a couple other commissions that do meet in person. So again, if that's something that you wanted to take up, the only thing I would ask is that you make, you take a vote on it here, and either tonight or at a future meeting, whatever you feel would be appropriate. And then, if the team wants to get back together in person, we certainly could do that. And if not, we can continue on. I think we've got a pretty good process down either way. So that's what I would.
I would concur. I'll go ahead and make that motion. I'd like to motion that with a unanimous vote, if everyone would like to ask staff to start the process of returning our meetings to in person, then we could do so. So with that, I'll make that motion, and I'll see if there's a second.
I'll second it. Commissioner Fisher.
Okay, with that, any further discussion or concern about that motion?
I have one comment, Commissioner Rasmussen here. I certainly don't have any issues going back to an in-person meeting. I can tell you, I feel that the Zoom calls have been working pretty well, and it's allowed me a little more flexibility with my work schedule. I've been on these meetings when I've been out of town and on work trips and whatnot. It's I still traveling quite a bit for work, and it's just been a little bit easier to coordinate my personal schedule with these meetings. I would certainly be willing to commit to coming back to the chamber, but it has been nice in that regard. It's given me a lot more flexibility with my other schedules and whatnot.
Okay. Councilmember Dennis, can you weigh in on if remote access would still be possible? I know the council is meeting in person. Is that correct?
Correct. We do meet in person, and I believe the technology would be here now that we're able to use this process. Because if you think about it, when we have our council meetings, there are times when we do provide the access to the community at large, so they can come in and be part of the conversation. At any point in time, if there's questions, or whether it be an open forum process like we do at the beginning of the meetings. So that technology does exist. And the other thing is too, that, and being respectful for everybody, I believe that in the times that we're in right now, we can all afford to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we do business to make things right. Again, appreciating the volunteer nature of our panel. I don't think there'd be any issue with that whatsoever.
Okay, well, I would like to amend my motion to include the feasibility of remote access if we were to move towards in-person meetings.
Hey, this is Commissioner Knable, and I would just like to put my thoughts in here. I'm a high-risk individual with a couple family members who are also high risk. We are currently, not too comfortable with, meeting as a large group if we can't have that social distance. Plus, wearing a mask during, the meetings would be something that would have to be, I think, 100% controlled there. But I would vote nay on that motion of all meeting in person at this time. I mean, maybe once if everybody is comfortable getting the vaccine or how that works going forward. But currently, at least my family is not comfortable with meeting in person currently.
Fair enough. Appreciate your input. Then I will rescind my motion. And at this point, or at this time, I would just make a request to staff that they propose how in-person meetings might be implemented and what that would look like, so that the commission can review that and make a decision at a further date, further time.
I can certainly do that.
All right. Thank you. And then I had two questions for Councilmember Dennis. I have recently, I've been asked numerous times if Pizza Ranch is still coming, and if so, when. I know that with COVID, there were some new economic considerations for any business owner. But I was curious if maybe you had heard anything on Pizza Ranch. And then secondly is the housing market has been especially difficult for some people this year. So the other question I got was, are there any developers planning affordable housing units for the city?
Okay, so on the first question, I have been made privy to some information on that particular what we'll call property owner right now. They own a piece of land. They're still kind of in a hold mode. I know there was another location in the city they had looked at. In the meantime, there were some financial considerations and other challenges for them, as there were for many restaurants over the past year. So without me breaking any, non-disclosure agreement or anything along those lines, to the best of my knowledge, I believe in good faith that they still want to come here and that they do own the property and that they are wanting to make a business here. But again, that's going to be internal decisions as a company that they're going to have to make. So, the land has been bought, they're paying the taxes on it and the upkeep on the land. So as long as, those things are happening, I mean, they would, be in a position of good standing with the city. And then as far as the second, we have a couple potential developments that are being contemplated or being discussed. Again, my knowledge of these is that they would be market rate at this time, not necessarily a workforce or a subsidized housing. So again, one of the things that has been an interesting challenge for us, and this kind of goes against the principles of normal business, where you would come into an area and you would do an analysis on the area to say, hey, is the city, underserved or overserved in terms of what we might want to bring forward as a process. I believe we are fully underserved when it comes to that type of residential. But as we just have scored the apartments coming in on 80th Street where the old City Hall was, that's the first time that we've had a development of that kind in over 20 years. So what we're hearing from that developer is that they have a tremendous amount of interest in the property, and that I believe once this gets opened up and set to market, those units are going to be rented out very, very quickly. So the fact that we now have had, and think about this in terms of like a track record, and I know you're an expert on real estate and all that stuff, Tony, but what I've been told by everybody along the chain of command in this is that when you have an investor come in and then they show some success, what that does now is that provides the confidence level for other investors of a similar type to want to come here and build. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. As a council, I believe I can speak in good faith for everybody, and that is that we seek a wide range and variety of housing types and styles, everything from single family all the way up to high density. And we would be open and welcome to fulfilling needs across the entire spectrum so that we can take care of people that are born here, that want to live here in Cottage Grove, stay as young adults, maybe end up having families or just sticking it out themselves and spending an entire lifetime here. So it's our goal to make sure that we do everything we can to foster that type of opportunity and environment where we can have those investors come here and put a nice process together.
Thank you. That is, I'm really surprised to see how fast that building's gone up. And who did I talk to? I talked to somebody who was a prospective tenant there, and they were told that it's already drawn quite a lot of interest. So I was encouraged by that. And as you said, once a developer can show a measure of success, that's going to attract other similar development. And I would also agree that that type of housing is underserved. I think the last development of that type was in the 90s, early 90s.
Yep.
So our population has grown quite a bit since then, and that hasn't kept pace. Any other questions from the commission? Seeing none, I think we can move on. On to item 9.1, acceptance of the 2021 Planning Commission rules. just a second. Seeing as nothing has changed with these rules, I would look to other commission members for comment or questions. And then I would look for a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve the rules for 2021.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Frazier. We got a motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second from Commissioner Rasmussen.
Second from Commissioner Rasmussen. Any further comment? Okay, then I'll turn it over to the director for roll call. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Frazier.
Aye.
Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
Commissioner Bigham.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Knable.
Aye.
And Chair Kambata.
Aye. Motion carries. On to item 9.2, election of officers. Officers up for election are vice chair and secretary. Those positions are currently held by Commissioner Frazier as vice chair and Commissioner Rasmussen as secretary. At this time, if those gentlemen would like to keep those positions, they're welcome to speak up, or if there are anybody else who would like to fill those positions, you may also speak up.
This is Commissioner Frazier. I'd certainly be willing to stay on as vice chair, but if there's somebody who wants it really bad, then that'd be fine with me as well.
Okay. I think you've done a fantastic job as vice chair. And you know, I don't see any reason for you to dispense from your position unless, like you said, somebody else wants it more. Anyone else want to be vice chair? All right. I'll turn Commissioner Frazier for vice chair over for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And I'll turn it over to the director for roll call.
All right, Commissioner Bigham. Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Frazier.
Aye.
Commissioner Knable.
Aye.
Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
And Chair Kambata.
Aye. All right, and then on to secretary. Currently, Commissioner Rasmussen holds this position. I'll ask you the same question. If you'd like to continue, please speak up, or if anyone else would like to occupy that position, please speak up.
Chair, this is Commissioner Rasmussen. I've sat in the secretary chair the last 2 years now, and I'd be honored to do it again this year. Similar to Frazier, if there's anybody else who would like to hold that role, I'd be all for that as well. But if not, I'd be proud to do it.
All right. Anybody else? I'm in agreement. As with Commissioner Frazier, I think Commissioner Rasmussen has done a fine job, and I don't see any reason for him to dispense from that position unless somebody is really eager to have it. All right. With that, I'll turn it over for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. As Commissioner Rasmussen continuing his, did we have a comment from Commissioner Bigham? Hello? Sorry. So again, for the position of secretary, Commissioner Rasmussen to continue for the following year. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and I'll turn it over to the director for a roll call.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bigham.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Frazier.
Aye.
Commissioner Knable.
Aye.
Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
And Chair Kambata.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, that is our agenda for the evening. Item number 10, adjournment. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Commissioner Rasmussen.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second by Commissioner Knable.
Second from Commissioner Knable. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and I'll turn it over to the director again.
All right, one last time. Commissioner Rasmussen.
Aye.
Commissioner Knable.
Aye.
Commissioner Bigham.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Frazier.
Aye.
And Chair Kambata.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work and your time this evening. Have a great night.